This is a school from the late 18th century, and this is a school from today. I guess some things never change, especially if something works well. If it ain't broke, then don't fix it, right? Except literacy rates are falling. People are struggling to make ends meet, let alone earn enough to afford the American dream. So what's the deal? Has something gone terribly wrong with the schooling system? Well, in short, no. It's working very well. Let me explain. I'm Ella Rose Roussel, and this is part 1 of the Dark Secrets of Mandatory Schooling series. So take a deep breath, put aside what you think you know about the schooling system, and let's dive in. But first, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, the American schooling system, because it isn't actually American, and it wasn't created by this guy, Horace Mann, who is known as the father of American public education. Instead, the dark roots of American education came from Prussia, and more specifically, this guy, Johann Fichte, who developed a radical system which he called the doctrine of scientific knowledge. Science in the 18th century was becoming a popular field of study. Fichte was one of many influential thinkers of the time, but his philosophy is so exceptionally twisted, I have to tell you in his own words, and I quote, "The schools must fashion the person and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished." The social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. If that didn't send chills down your spine, I don't know what will. He was influenced by ideas from people like this guy, John Locke, who said the human mind at birth is a blank slate, and this guy, Thomas Hobbes, who suggests that man is led by his natural inclination for war and conflict. He believed a centralized authority with absolute power would ensure peace and security, such as a monarch or a government. You know, this kind of reminds me of that dog and whistle experiment. You know, the one where the dog salivates every time he hears the whistle? Except instead of salivating, it's someone's attention and focus being diverted, not just once, but constantly throughout the day. You may be wondering, but why would someone even want to do this? Like, what is the motive? And to that, I'd say one word: winning. The year was 1806, and Prussia had just lost a war against Napoleon. It was a humiliating defeat. It was decided that this loss was due to a disobedient, free-thinking Prussian army that didn't take to command well or follow orders. The Prussian government and army didn't want this happening again, and so an 8-year-long schooling system was created. Elite and poor attended school. The upper classes would go on to further education, for example, university, with a select few going on to receive PhDs, destined for higher offices and positions, while the poorer pupils had no access to this secondary education and so worked. It is worth mentioning that Fichte also disliked Jews and wanted to kick them out of Germany for a better, stronger race of Germans. Sound familiar? Adolf Hitler was a fan of Fichte's work and was believed to have been very heavily influenced by him. Because of this, Fichte is considered the spiritual father of neo-Nazism. But how did the ideas of this Prussian neo-Nazism inspirer come to America, you ask? Horace Mann, of course. Mann had been promoted to a position in the newly formed Board of Education in Massachusetts in 1837. It was through his research into education systems around the world that he began to hear about Prussia, where the education system had proved a great success for the Prussian government, and news was getting around fast. Mann and a team of other educators traveled to Prussia to see the system for themselves. Upon their return to the US, they rigorously advocated for the Prussian system to be brought to America. In 1846, Mann wrote a report that led to the first state law that made it mandatory for children to go to school. Horace Mann stated that the state is the father of the children. His belief was that it was the state's job to take responsibility for the children, not their parents. Mann then supported the governor of Massachusetts in spreading the Prussian system across the entire state. The governor, Edward Everett, had been the first to receive a PhD from, can you guess? Yep, Prussia. The Prussian system quickly spread to the rest of the northern states, and after the Civil War in 1867, Elizabeth Peabody, Mann's sister, and her husband George Peabody created the Peabody Education Fund to help spread the Prussian model across the country. By 1880, most American schools were run by dignitaries who had left America to earn degrees in, you know it, Prussia. By 1900, all of the PhDs in America were trained in Prussia, and laws were in place across America to establish and maintain mandatory schooling in every state. The Prussian system went on to infect the rest of Europe, along with most other countries. I wish the tale could end here. We've exposed neo-Nazi roots and the attempted destruction of free will through mandatory schooling, but it gets so much worse. Before the schooling system was legislated across the country in 1897, this guy, Richard Henry Pratt, founded the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, which was a special boarding school just for Native Indian Americans. The purpose of the school was to assimilate these Native people into Anglican culture, essentially turning this kid into this kid. This is the same kid, only this is before he was processed by the school, and this is after. These photos were shown to the public as proof that this training method worked. Of course, this came at a massive cost to the government, I mean the taxpayers. At the time, campaigns like this served as viral propaganda for the masses and drummed up support for boarding schools across the nation. Now, let's be clear, this wasn't a place natives could choose to go. It was a place they were forced to go. Many children were taken from their native parents and forced into schools like these to undergo this treatment. Upon their arrival, children had their pictures taken before they were stripped of their tribal clothes and affiliated items such as medicine bags, jewelry, and ceremonial objects. The boys had their hair cut short and were dressed in military uniform, while the girls were forced into skirts and corsets to fit the popular American fashion. To complete their transformation and destroy their identity, they were given new Anglican names and were forced to be photographed once more. These schools, or rather prisons, were at the time heralded as a success, completely ignoring more than 500 Native children who died due to malnutrition and the slum-like living conditions. Many cases of sickness and death likely weren't even shared with the public, and the public opinion about natives was not favorable at the time. Pratt stated, "A great general has said that the only good Indian is a dead one. In a sense, I agree with the sentiment, but only in this, that all the Indian there is in the race should be dead. Kill the Indian in him and save the man." Many teachers and supposed guardians neglected and abused the children for decades, which resulted in the boarding schools being shut down around the 1980s, as the public began to learn more about the harm caused by such institutions, and advocated for the closure of each boarding house. This, in turn, prompted federal policy change. You'd think this forced schooling debacle would have been ended sooner, and would have prevented mandatory schooling for the rest of the public, but alas, here we are.